Yes. Yay! All right. Okay. Do you mind if I do this just so that I can see? That's going to be okay. It's not going to screw up the thing. Do you need to do any introductions or do I just jump right in? All right. It's really nice to see you all. My name is Pat Dumas. I have been with Firefly since the beginning, which is really kind of cool now that I think about it. I'm the old broad here, or one of them anyway, and I'm really very happy today to be able to share with you this information about a pretty important astrological event that's going to be coming up next year. Now, for some of you who you might have heard as you came in, we have three major planetary shifts coming into play in the next year. I mean, there are more than that, but three biggies because it's the three outer planets are all going to change signs. We have Pluto, the planet of transformation and power, the understanding both how we work with power and how power is worked on us. That will be shifting into Aquarius next month. It'll be there for about 20 years. Then in March of next year, Neptune will shift into Aries, and Uranus will move into Gemini in July. So there's a lot that's going to be going on. And I'm going to give you a little bit of historical background, too, from the last time that Neptune was in Aries. But let's go ahead and get this underway. The reason why I chose to talk about the fiery side of spirit is because for the last roughly 13 to 14 years, we've had the more ethereal, dreamy, idealistic, maybe is the best way to put it, bit of Pisces being attached to Neptune. Neptune's very comfortable in that sign. He rules that sign. So the shift into Aries will mark a major, major change in how the energy of Neptune will be expressed. And each of us is going to feel it a little bit differently depending on how our charts, our personal birth charts are arrayed. But globally, there is no doubt we're going to be sensing the changes that are to come. So the biggest thing to keep your eye out for is how is the fiery side of the spiritual zealot, the warrior, going to manifest itself when Neptune is in Aries. First of all, the way we're going to go through this, to keep it simple, we'll be looking at exploring the meaning of what it means when a planet is first discovered. I mean, that was in the last, 200 and some odd years, almost 300 years. We had the three outer planets suddenly discovered. Then we've had a couple of smaller planetoids, Eris and Chiron, for example. But the three outer ones really are the ones that we're going to be focusing on. There's also, what is the energy that happens when a planet changes sign? And then finally, oops, sorry, hope you can see that, sorry. What does it mean? What does Neptune in Aries actually represent? So first of all, when a planet's being discovered, the accepted belief by astrologers is that planets are discovered when they're supposed to be. That there is a certain ability for the collective consciousness, read us, to be able to understand what the meaning of the planet's energy is all about. And that can only happen once the planet is discovered. Almost always there is some kind of historic connection to the planet's energy and the events that occur. Now, astrology was always a visual science until the discovery of the telescope. It was what they could see with the naked eye. So the furthest they could go was Saturn. Saturn was the furthest one out. Now, to give you an idea, rather, astronomy versus astrology. In astrology, we astrologers believe that each of the planets and the two luminaries, the sun and the moon, represent a facet of the human psychology, the human personality. For example, Mercury is how do we think? How do we communicate? How do we gather and disseminate information? Venus talks about how do we achieve rapport with another human being? What is our desire and attitude towards merging together? Mars is the one that examines our libido. our aggression, the outward pushing masculine energy that is represented, whereas Venus's is more the receptive energy. Jupiter is where those three, by the way, those first three, the Mercury, Venus, and Mars, these are the inner planets. Then we come to Jupiter, all about growth and expansion. Where is it that we find faith? But just as Saturn was the last planet that the naked eye, or so, small telescopes could see, Saturn represented boundaries. It was the farthest the eye could reach. So if Jupiter was all about how do we grow out there, then Saturn was all about reining it back in and making control of the spaces that were in play. Then we came Uranus. We came to Uranus. Its discovery back in 1781 really was it meant that we astrologers now had a way to incorporate the concept of the freedom urge, of self-motivation, self-determination, rebellion. It wasn't that those were not present prior, but with the discovery of Uranus, technology and freedom and rebellion became part of the nomenclature. Can we shut that door, please? Part of the nomenclature of the times, really. So it deals with technology breakthroughs. Now, we think technology now is like the latest Apple phone that comes out. But technology in those times was just as much of a breakthrough, just on their scale. Freedom, rebellion, the idea of actually retrieving a part of the self and bringing yourself up to the best level you could be. Prior to that, you were born into a certain job. More than likely, you inherited whatever your father did. If you were the second son, you went into the church. If you were the third son, you went into the military. I mean, that was how it was done. There was no self-actualization going on at all. Be all you can be was not a phrase back in those times. So with the ability of having more free time because of what technology made available for yielding greater results in farming, greater results in industry, suddenly people realized there could be something more. People could be something more. So really, it's all about thinking outside the box. This is why Uranus represents Aquarius in many, many ways. As I mentioned, Uranus was discovered in 1781. When it was discovered, it was found in the sign of Gemini. I'm not going to go into all the explanations of how we knew that because we'd be here till next week. Trust me. It was discovered in 1781. It was determined that the cycle around the sun took about 84 years, and it lasted in each sign for about 14 years. Now, if you think about it, you look at that 84-year cycle, the planetary study of us, the planet that represents the self and the human condition, so to speak, is about the length of a human lifespan. So that was really quite in tune. Now, it was in Gemini from 1774, yes, right, I did type that correct, till 1781. Just because we didn't see it yet doesn't mean it wasn't there. What happened in those years? Well, we had the American Revolution. There's our rebellion. We had the French Revolution, throwing off all of the weight of the nobility within their country. Whoop, there it is. We had the Haitian Revolution as well. But beyond the wars and the political rebellions, we also had the Industrial Revolution. We had the beginning of the steam engine. James Watt's steam engine was discovered during this time. There we go. Pierre-Simon Girard was the first Frenchman, the first person, to put together a water turbine, which, of course, brought additional amounts of power to be able to be utilized in the Industrial Revolution. The first circular saw, it didn't look like that, I couldn't find a version of it, okay, but Samuel Miller in Britain invented the circular saw. And then another Frenchman, another Pierre-Simon, as a matter of fact, Pierre-Simon Laplace, was the first to do the really first seminal mathematics work in differential equations. So the Uranian tendency really was well represented during this period of time. After Uranus, almost 60 years later, Neptune came along. Neptune represents the subconscious, intuition. It represents dreams and creativity. It represents dissolving all boundaries between us. It's the idea of Pisces and Neptune, which it rules, is that idea of having nothing between us. A Piscean in love truly wants to merge. Neptune has that same merging energy. But what's even more interesting about Neptune is that it represents illusion. It represents the dream state. And if you just think about how these two later planets were discovered, it's so very much in tune with their own natures. Uranus was discovered finally because of the invention of a higher powered telescope. Technology made its discovery possible. So it lived up to its Uranian point of view. Neptune was discovered, on the other hand, and it was discovered actually on the equinox, which was kind of funny, I thought, in 1846 in September. It was discovered because someone studying the orbit of Uranus saw some aberrations in there. It was this illusion, this hidden, subtle change that made people start to track that instead of in addition to Uranus. And they discovered that's another planet. So the planet of illusion was found because of illusion. I mean, come on, it doesn't get more ironic than that. So it represents inspiration. It represents creativity and spirituality. It represents the dream state. It represents escapism. But it really, if I had to nail it down to one thing, positive and negative, it represents the ideal. There's a reason why Neptune rules credit cards. It's the ideal concept of money. Nothing actually, no filthy lucre changes hands. It's all in the ether. So, as I mentioned, it was discovered in 1846. This planet, unlike the 84 years of Uranus, takes about 165 years to go all the way around the sun. And it stays in each sign for about 14 years. It was in the last degrees of Pisces when it was discovered, that autumnal equinox in 1846. And it really was, it stayed there. It had a couple of retrograde motions, but it was in there through 1862. So what was going on at that point in time? Well, we had, missed my step here. We had debates over slavery. Hadn't yet become abolished, but we had the debates over it. We had really major strides in pharmaceuticals, the use of medicinal herbs, and the actual concoction of medication. We had the real burst of the spiritualism movement and the ability to connect with the other side becoming more commonplace. We had a lot more interest in comparative religion, looking at a lot of different ways to make belief systems come to the forefront. We had a lot more tendencies towards self-deception and illusion as a result of Neptune the last time in Pisces. Tremendous social reform, but also our desire to find what is our purpose? Why are we here? This became part of the global lexicon. Instead of just doing one's duty, one became, why am I here? What is my purpose so that I can do it better? So coming back again to this, it shifted into Aries on April 12th, 1861. Anybody know the significance of that date? Fort Sumter was fired on the next day. The next day. As soon as the belief system, the planet that rules philosophy, that rules idealism, shifted into the warlike, fiery sign of Aries, a war began. And that's not the first time that happened, because if we go back into history, although we didn't discover her until 1846, just like with Uranus, It had been going through the constellations since the universe began, or at least since the solar system began, right? So astrologers were able to track her role back to see the last times that we had been with Neptune and Aries. And one of the first times that we notice is in from 60 to 73 about CE. This was when, I don't know how many of you got assaulted with ancient Anglo-Saxon history when you were in high school. I had a really vicious English teacher. So this was when Boudica led the Iceni tribes, and she really brought in an uprising against the British invaders, the Romans, excuse me, that had been invading ancient Britain. Christianity was taking its hold at that point in time throughout the Roman Empire. Palestine found conflict as well because the Jews were uprising against the Romans to take back their locations. And this was also the time, 60 to 73 CE, when Josephus wrote his Histories of the War of the Jews. This is considered to be one of the main histories of Christ. Not the stories of Christ through the Bible, but the histories of Jesus Christ. We secondly had a lot of other wars going on when the next time came around, or the next few times actually. I skipped from 60, I went up to the 800s, I hope you don't mind. 879 to 892 in England, Alfred the Great ruled Great Britain. And the big difference with him, he had brought into play the concept of wanting to centralize government and stop having all of these little wars all over the place. It was he who really wanted to foster the concept of formal education and learning in his realm. He didn't want uneducated serfs. He wanted knowledgeable people as his subjects. He also created a navy, very Neptune-like, to keep the Vikings from invading Great Britain. But in 1206, we had another Neptune in Aries, 1206 to 1219. This is at the same time that right now we're having, or well, soon, we will have a Jupiter-Saturn cycle where Jupiter is making a square. Keep your eye out in December for astro weather on Mighty Networks, because I'll be talking about that. The same kind of energy was in play at the time the Crusades were really in full swing. Now, the Second Crusades, first ones had started back in the I think it was 1117, but I'm not positive on that. They were also at a time when Pluto was in Aries, so there's another fiery indication of power being utilized over people. In 1206, during that period of time, Genghis Khan conquered or started his conquest of Eurasia. We had also, though, on the other side of that coin, we had the founding of several monastic orders. The Dominicans and the Franciscans were founded during that period of time. In 1383 was England, oh, it's hard to see, I apologize. That's England's peasant revolt occurred in 1381, which looked for the reforms and rights for common man. And that was when the story of Robin Hood, which is what that little red feathered cap is supposed to represent. I apologize, you can't see it well. The idea of robbing from the rich and giving to the poor. There's nothing more Neptune and Aries than that. Yep, okay, I talked about that. And then the next time around, 1534 to 1547, again, Pluto was in Aquarius. Henry VIII broke from Rome. He declared himself the head of the Church of England. This is when the real problems with Catholics, between Catholics and Protestants occurred. Henry VIII, that's supposed to represent a monastery, best I could come up with on Canva. He destroyed and dissolved the monasteries, destroyed or sold relics of the church, and it really caused some major, major problems that to this day we are still facing. I mean, the Troubles in the 60s in Ireland is just a few hundred years down the road of exactly what was going on during this period of time. We also had, though, we had Martin Luther, who made the Reformation possible to give Protestantism some more strength, and he translated the Bible into German during this period of time. And finally, in this period, we had Valerius Cordus, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He was a German physician and botanist, and he wrote the first book about medicinal plants and minerals and how to make drugs, how to form pharmacopoeia in 1546. So there's a lot that went on during that particular side period. Now, the next time around was 1697 to 1711. And I won't say nothing happened, that there were no wars. I wish to heck you could say that there was a 50-year period in our history, that there were no wars somewhere, but that's not true. What was really important about this period, though, was the uniting in 1707 of England and Scotland coming together, the unification of England and Scotland. It was after the rebellions of the War of the Spanish Succession, we decided to make, my ancestors decided to make Scotland and England come together. They're wanting now to separate again, but who knows? We'll see how that goes. So the most recent one, as I mentioned, in 1861 is when Neptune first moved into Aries the last time, and we had the beginning of the Civil War. Again, with Uranus in Aries at the time, which will be coming up, as I mentioned, in July next year while all this is going on. So what did we have going on besides the Civil War? We had the actual U.S. abolition of slavery, not just talking about it, but doing it, which ultimately led to the separation. Now, bear in mind, that was not the only cause of the Civil War. It was also the concept of states' rights, the idea that people could be autonomous, that states could remain able to determine their own futures. The Neptunian goal was uniting. That's what Abraham Lincoln wanted. The South wanted to retain that freedom of Uranus, being able to call their own shots. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 freed all the slaves. In 1870, adult male former slaves were granted the right to vote. Took a while for women, but eventually we got there. This was also the time period, though, that the KKK was formed in 1865. In 1863, the Red Cross was founded in Switzerland. The American Red Cross was about a decade later. But this was also around the same time that the first home for vulnerable children, or a benevolent orphanage rather than a workhouse, was created back in 1866. It was also the first time of the first nationalized labor union, 1868, I beg your pardon. Louis Pasteur also invented pasteurization to destroy bacteria, very Neptunian. He patented that process of pasteurization in 1865. In 1866, dynamite was invented because we needed more ways to blow people up. In 1869, Dmitri Mendeleev, I always struggle over his name, published the periodic table of elements. So this was one more scientific discovery, but utilizing the Neptunian goals that are created of unification, bringing it all into order. And also, well, there's the periodic table. And who else came about in this time? P.T. Barnum. You want to talk about somebody who can sell disinformation and a hoax? That was P.T. Barnum. Does that sound familiar? So we've got all kinds of entertainment going on here, the idea of illusion, and the idea of hoaxes that are made mainstream. What does it mean, though, when a planet changes its signs? Well, to give you a start, remember, back up a little bit. Remember how I said at the beginning that each planet represents a facet of the human personality, and that each one has a way of it expresses its energy. Well, that's the what. The energy expressed by the planet is the what. Your communication skills, Mercury, right? How you achieve control, what you fear, Saturn. What are you aggressive about? What motivates you, Mars? The where, that refers to the house in the chart that is either activated by the planet being in it, that the planet's sign rules. I won't go into all of that, but the where, the area of life that gets activated is the where. But the why, or the how rather, is the style in which that the energy is expressed. Now let me give you an example. Everybody has some kind of way that they express anger. That's your Mars energy. But somebody who has Mars in Aries is going to express that energy far differently than someone who has Mars in Libra. Mars in Aries is going to blow their top fast, get over it, and wonder why everybody is still, they haven't caught up yet, right? Mars in Libra buries it. They want a win-win for everybody. Their concept of anger is, how do I make this work for all of us? And it can lead to a lot of ulcers, quite honestly. Leads to people pleasing. But the energy is there. It just is expressed differently. Another way that you can think about this is think of the planets as the room or the furniture in your house. Each of the houses of the chart, those 12 pieces of pie in a round circle, those are the rooms. The how, the signs, that's the way you decorate them. So most of us have a sofa, but I'll bet all of ours look a little bit different. That's the way you think about how the planets are expressed. Okay, so now we get to the meat here. Neptune shifting into Aries. Now, Neptune's been in Pisces since April of 2011. April 4th through August 4th, it was, solidly moving forward from 0 to probably about 2 degrees. But then it hit a retrograde cycle, and it seemed to go backwards, okay? February 3rd of 2012 through what's coming, March 30th, 2025, is how we keep on moving forward here. It has gone a couple retrogrades, but it hasn't left Pisces, okay? Now, October 22nd of next year, for a short time until January 26th, it will bounce back again slightly into Pisces, but it will be out completely by that January. Then it will move into Aries, as seen here. On March 30th through October 22nd, it will be in Aries. Very early degrees. Remember, it moves so slowly. So when it goes into a retrograde, on October 22nd, it will have moved backwards enough to bounce back into Pisces for that short period of time until January. Then it will move forward again. Finally, it will enter Taurus on May 21st. It will do a couple more backward motions, but it will be there really until about March 23rd of 2039. Long involved period there. But what might it bring? If we know that Neptune talks about creativity, spiritualism, idealism, the concepts of escapism and addiction, the need to, if I can't bear my existence, to change it, alter it in some way. That could be drugs, alcohol, I don't know, spending, scrolling, whatever. How can that be translated to the more fiery work of Aries touching it? Challenge-oriented, bold, in your face, very courageous and brave, and basically not backing down to anybody for any reason. Let's see. I think we can expect more than anything else the idea of major political ideologies that are going to be shifting and changing. Remember, Neptune's energy, the way it makes change is by dissolving. Uranus's energy is like a lightning bolt, sudden, swift change. Pluto's energy is like an atomic bomb. It just destroys everything to make room to rebuild. But Neptune's energy is more like the river that cuts out the Grand Canyon. Inexorable, never-ending dissolving. So if we're looking at our current ideologies, they're dissolving in front of our eyes now. And we're starting to watch them slowly reform. How that will happen depends very much on us and whether we choose to embrace and go forward or try desperately to hang on to the illusion of control. I think we're going to see a lot more inclusive social movements. By inclusive, I mean everybody gets rights. Everybody gets their chance. Just imagine the rulers rulers, the leaders, I guess that's a better way to put it, having the compassion of Neptune combined with the utter fierceness of Aries to not allow anything but what they want to go through. On the positive side, these are the great reformers. What is it on the negative side? The zealot. So we have seen both, and we're going to continue to see both over these next few months. There's going to be a lot more fiery confrontations, a lot more forcibly, as if it could be any more, forcibly expressed points of view, which will be more incredibly polarized and divergent than we could ever imagine. And most of them are going to be fueled by illusion, by misinformation. Remember, Neptune is all about illusion. That's what it is truly all about. And the idea of the holy war, this is when I said zealots, I meant it indeed. This reminds me of Crusades energy. So we've got a lot on our plate coming up. There is the concept of confused masculinity. We can see it today. There are so many men, present company excluded, so many men who feel on the outside, feel as though their needs are being overlooked for the needs of women trying to find their freedom after so many years. So there's going to be this, if not confusion, could on the most negative sense, it could turn into more widespread toxic masculinity. And just as much, and the reason I say masculinity, Aries is absolutely the masculine. And if there's dissolving energy from Neptune, that's why I say that, okay? In addition, we're going to see traditional authority roles changing. Now, coming back here and looking at these two together, I think we're going to be seeing a lot fewer women who want to stop their own self-actualization in order to bear children. So we'll probably see a decrease in birth rates in the country. I think we also may see, for some reason, a decrease in potency of sperm. I'm not sure why, but that kept coming to me when I was doing this talk. So I'm throwing that one out there. There's also going to be this idea of the roles changing places, of a lot more female bosses and guys finding great joy in staying home and working from home, doing their thing from home, possibly raising the children, possibly not, maybe just doing their own thing. There's also going to be, and that brings me to the idea of the total change in the concept of the nuclear family. How many of you have heard of this Project 2025 that's out there? Okay, that's not by accident. We are in the very last throes of Pluto in Capricorn, the concept of power resting in the establishment or the known traditional patterns. We're going to have to find a way to allow these nuclear family things to change and shift and grow, or we're going to be in rough shape, I think is the best way to put it. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see a lot more androgynous fashions, excuse me, this thing's falling apart here, fashion styles. How many of you saw the opening for the Olympics in Paris? People were losing their minds over what they saw walking down that runway. But it's not that outre in Europe. The entire globe is finding this lack of a need for these labels to maintain. Instead, reaching for what is right and true for me. That's what I think we're going to start seeing, even when it comes down to fashion. You're also probably going to see a lot more, and this is not just because of global warming, but I think in conjunction with that and the fact that Neptune is in Aries, rising sea levels. We have already started to see glaciers melting. We have already started to see archipelagos, there we go, lose islands, not really lose them, but they sink because the oceans are being raised so much. So what does that mean? When we just this last 2 weeks had 2 major hurricanes hit Florida. How much do you want to bet there's going to be population migrations? Everybody's going to live in frickin' Ohio. They're all going to be in the middle of the country. There's probably going to be shifts of where people can safely live because of the way that the sea levels are shifting and changing. But in conjunction with that, we also have a lot more wildfires and droughts. This is where Aries comes in. California can tell you all about that. Arizona can tell you all about that. This is where we need the technology of Uranus coming in to work on continued desalination work so that we can make water out of salt water, since we're going to have so much of it, There's going to be a changed perception as well in the concept of what a peacekeeper looks like. And I had to laugh. It was just so serendipitous. I mean, you want to talk about synchronizations. I was sitting here typing the notes for this last night, and I had Star Trek on, the first movie, Star Trek, the first new version with Chris Pine. And you saw how many of you saw that movie? At the beginning, he drives off the cliff, but there's that automated cop, RoboCop, right? I think that's what we're looking at. AI, robotics, the concept of no longer there being as many men in the field, but the incredible widespread taking of life, very not face-to-face, but more, I can't think of the right word. I think you know what I mean, though. It's this idea of no longer facing your opponent, but instead being able to, on a mass scale, cause ends of life. But you know what? I didn't want to come in here and have you guys think, oh my God, I'm going to go home and hide in the closet. It's not all bad. It really isn't. Because along with this, Neptune and Aries brings us the potential for pioneering vision. There is no entrepreneur better than an Aries. They are brave, they take risks, they take chances, and Neptune will give them the vision to be able to move forward with that. We also have the idea of this sense of spiritual ascendancy, the idea that we really can ascend, that we will be more than just spiritual beings having a human existence. We will start potentially to merge with what our cosmic consciousness can be. There's so much more journeying and shamanic work that's being done right now. And correlation, we have a lot more people who are experiencing psychic ability that are becoming more interested, if not experiencing it, and interested in learning more about tarot, astrology, psychic mediumship. These are all Neptune things. And Aries is self. That's all it is, self. It's me. Instead of just thinking me first, though, it's how can me, expand my consciousness. You're going to see a lot more hard work and fighting for marginalized societies. And you're going to see it being done by youth. Aries is the youth. Aries represents the babies of the zodiac. And protection of the weak is what Neptune's all about. So I don't think you're going to see people like the LGBTQ community, people like the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, not being defended. You're just not going to see it. We will have the people out there. You're going to have justice system reform. Neptune, 12th house, Pisces, this is all about isolation and, in many cases, institutionalizing. But if Neptune is about the ideal, it's going to make it not just a place to punish, but a place to make people better than when they came in. Have them leave in a much better state than they arrived. And I think you're going to see an amazing amount of environmental protection coming up. I think, again, I'm going to say it loud and strong, I think our youth are going to lead the way. They are going to lead the way. So to give you heart for this, there are positives here. We get to choose which way this energy expresses itself. Are we willing to make the leap and step up to change? Or are we going to hide in the escapism and illusion that the shadow side of Neptune can represent? So I ask you to think about this. Neptune in Aries, following Neptune in Pisces, is all about waking up to the reality behind the illusions, and to help us remember our true nature as eternal beings. This is thanks to brilliant astrologer, writer, and mystic Jessica Davidson. I hope this has been useful to you, and I hope one of you gets a chance to win a class on October 26th. Thank you so much. Any questions? All righty. Enjoy the rest of the open house.